We now come to Prime Minister's questions. I start with Caroline Noakes.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I know that the whole House will want to join me in congratulating Emma Raducanu, Joe Salisbury, Alfie Hewitt and Gordon Reid for their victories in the US Open. They've made the whole nation proud. Mr. Speaker, on Battle of Britain Day, we honour the legacy of those brave air crews who defended our nation. I'm sure that members will also want to join me in wishing you well, Mr. Speaker, for the G7 Speakers and Presiding Officers Conference in Chorley later this week. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Caroline Noakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to pass on my condolences to the Prime Minister on the sad loss of his mother. Mr. Speaker, raising children is very expensive, more so when they are disabled. The children impacted by sodium valproate have suffered physically, mentally and indeed financially. When the Cumberledge report was published, there was real hope that they would get support. However, on the last day before summer recess, a written ministerial statement indicated that recommendation 4 of that report would not be actioned. Can I please ask my right honourable friend to urge the Secretary of State for Health to look again at that and give the financial redress to the parents of those children that they so desperately need?
Well, friend, for her kind words. And on her substantive point, she's entirely right to raise the issues investigated by Baroness Cumberledge, and we've given the report full consideration and accept the overarching conclusions of the report, Mr. Speaker, and are committed to making rapid progress in addressing all the areas it mentions, including the one that she covers today.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about Emma Raducanu, a tremendous success in the US Opens, on the Battle of Britain and on the G7 Speakers Conference? And Mr. Speaker, can I also offer my condolences to the Prime Minister on the loss of his mother? As I know firsthand, losing a parent is never easy. Mr. Speaker, how many extra hours a week would a single parent working full-time on the minimum wage have to work to get back the £20 a week the Prime Minister plans to take away from them in his universal credit cuts?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I think it's. I thank the right honourable for his kind words. But on his substantive point about universal credit, Mr. Speaker, it is absurd because the Labour Party. I'll give you a statistic, Mr. Speaker. Every single recipient of universal credit would lose their benefits under Labour because they want to abolish universal credit, Mr. Speaker. And I think that this House and this party should be, this government should be very proud of what we're doing and continue to do to support the low paid. And it was another Conservative institution, the living wage, Mr. Speaker, that increased the incomes of families on the living wage by £4,000 a head, Mr. Speaker. What they want to do, Mr. Speaker, is keep this country in lockdown, keep this country in furlough without moving forward at all.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister didn't answer the question. The Work and Pension Secretary seems to think it's an extra 2 hours a week. So let me make it even easier for the Prime Minister. Is the correct answer higher or lower than that?
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the right honourable gentleman is that under this government, for the first time in decades, wages are rising, Mr. Speaker. Wages across the board are rising, and they're 4.1% up on where they were before the pandemic. In fact, I'm very pleased. Of course, what they want to do is to continue to take money in taxation and put it into benefits. We don't think that's the right way, Mr. Speaker. We want to encourage high wages and high skills, Mr. Speaker. And that is the difference between this government and the Labour Party opposite. I think it is a good thing. I think it's a good thing, for instance, that Costa Coffee is now paying 5% more than they were before the pandemic. And never forget, if we listened to Captain Hindsight, Mr. Speaker, Costa Coffee would still be closed.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, it wasn't a difficult question. The answer to the question, maybe it's silly, they say. It's a silly question. How much would somebody working full-time on the minimum wage have to, how many hours they'd have to work to make up for the cut, is apparently a silly question. The answer, I'll give the Prime Minister the answer to the question. It is much, much higher. A single parent could be a constituent working on the minimum wage, already working full-time, would need to work over 9 hours a week on top of their full-time job just to get the money back that the Prime Minister is taking away from them. Prime Minister, they are already working full-time. They've got kids. How on earth does the Prime Minister think they're going to find the time to work an extra 9 hours? In truth, Mr. Speaker, an extra day every week. How, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I tell you what we're doing to support people on low incomes, not only with the living wage, but 30 hours of free childcare, freezing petrol duty, Mr. Speaker, extending the cost of heating allowance for 780,000 people across this country. But even more important than that, Mr. Speaker, for the low-paid, what we're doing is seeing encouraging measures to see their wages rise. We're investing in their skills, Mr. Speaker. We're investing in work coaches, Mr. Speaker. And there's a dividing line now between this government and the opposition. We want a high-wage, high-skill economy with controlled immigration, Mr. Speaker. And what they want is low wages, low skills, and uncontrolled immigration. That's what they stand for.
Let's test that right now. We've had 3 questions and the Prime Minister hasn't answered one of them. And it's obvious why. The truth is that these low-paid workers can't work longer hours to get back the money the Prime Minister is cutting from them. He knows it. They know it. Millions of working families will be hit hard, very hard, by the Prime Minister's universal credit cut. And the reason, Prime Minister, is this. Why would they have to work an extra 9 hours, a full day every week, to get that £20 back? It's because of his broken tax system. He's just said how good it is. So let's test it. After his national insurance rise, for every extra pound that these workers earn, his government will take more than 75 pence from them. That's why they have to work for 9 hours one day. Why is the Prime Minister? He's just said how he's going to raise wages, what he's going to do. That's the situation. Why is the Prime Minister making a bad situation worse for working people by hammering them with a cut to universal credit and a tax rise?
Mr. Speaker, actually what we've done with our local housing alliance is increase by £600 the amount of money to be available to exactly the type of person that he mentions. But he attacks the plan, Mr. Speaker. He attacks our plan to fix the backlogs in the NHS that we announced last week. And I have to say, I thought it was utterly incredible that the party of Nye Bevan should have come to this House last Wednesday and voted against measures that would fix the NHS, Mr. Party. And Mr. Speaker, it's quite clear that this is now the party of the NHS. They simply do not have a plan, Mr. Speaker. They don't have a plan for universal credit. They want to abolish it, and they don't have a plan to fix the NHS or social care, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, an unfair tax rise which won't fix social care and won't clear the NHS backlog is not a plan, Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister pretends. He pretends he's no alternative but to hammer working people with tax rises and universal credit cuts. But that's not true. His approach means that a working single parent who's a qualified nurse would lose £1,143. A supermarket worker could lose £1,093. A teaching assistant could lose £1,081. But at the same time, the Prime Minister wasted billions on crony contracts, cut taxes for people buying second homes, and handed out super tax deduction for the biggest companies. That's not taking, Mr. Speaker, that's not taking difficult decisions, that's making political choices. So why is the Prime Minister choosing to take a tax system that's already loaded against working people and making it even more unfair?
Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely ridiculous that he should attack the government over salaries for nurses when we put them up by 3%, Mr. Speaker, on top of the 12.8% rise that we introduced, when we're hiring 50,000 more nurses, Mr. Speaker, and when we're just putting another £36 billion into the NHS and social care on top of the £33 billion that this government invested when we came into office. We are... Mr. Speaker, 1 in 10 of the people in this country is now on an NHS waiting list. They know that the NHS backlog needs to be fixed. They know that this government has a plan, and they know that Labour has got absolutely nothing to say.
Keir Starmer.
I just wonder what the millions of people facing a £1,000 cut on low wages will think of that. This country's success is built by working people, but the tax system is loaded against them. The Prime Minister may not understand the pressures facing families across the country, but we do. And the reality is this: taxes on working people up, national insurance up, council tax up, energy bills, food prices, burdens on families up, up, up. The Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, needs to get real and understand the terrible impact of his decisions on working people across this country. Mr. Speaker, this afternoon he has the chance to change course, to vote with Labour to cancel a cut to universal credit, and then to stop clobbering working people with unfair tax rises. Will he do so?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me tell. I think you see the panto season has come early. So let me tell him. Growth. Which country?
Order. If it is, it's certainly behind you, Prime Minister.
Well, let me ask you, Mr. Speaker, since you're a man of great restraint and taste and judgment, which country has the fastest growth in the G7? Where is employment up, Mr. Speaker? Where are job vacancies at the highest level? Up, Mr. Speaker. As for wages, Mr. Speaker, they are up. Higher than they were before the pandemic. I've listened to the right honourable gentleman very carefully over the last fortnight. I'm told that he has a 14,000-word essay in gestation, Mr. Speaker. I don't know why he can't produce it right away. I mean, why does the world have to wait for the thoughts of Chairman Keir? Having listened to what he's had to say, his non-existent plan for benefits, for universal credit, his non-existent plan for health and social care, I can compress those 14,000 words to 4, Mr. Speaker. Vote Labour, wait longer. That's what he stands for, Mr. Speaker. Our plan for jobs is working, Mr. Speaker. Our plan for COVID is working.
Hey, come on, Cheryl. The Minister needs to count the number of words. Come on, Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, be it farm workers or lorry drivers, my employers are saying they want more staff. What more can the Prime Minister do to increase the training and mobility of job seekers to help them into the jobs they need?
I thank my honourable friend, and she's absolutely right to point out to the problem of lorry driver shortages, which is affecting the whole world, from Europe to North America. What we're doing immediately is, of course, working to get out more licences. We're taking advantage of a post-Brexit freedom, I can tell the House, so that all the young thrusters on these benches here with a post-97 driver's licence can now drive a vehicle with a trailer as well. Everybody can drive a vehicle with a trailer as well. But what we're also seeing, Mr. Speaker, after a long period of stagnation in wages for those in the road haulage industry, we're also seeing an increase, a long overdue increase in wages. And that, Mr. Speaker, is part of the same phenomenon that this government is introducing and they are opposing.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I pass on my condolences to the Prime Minister and his family for the sad loss of his mother the other day. And, of course, I join with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition on congratulating Emma Raducanu for her fantastic success in New York last Saturday. And, of course, we mourn the anniversary last Saturday of 20 years since the horrors of 9/11. We remember all of those that paid the sacrifice and that outrage that took place. Mr. Speaker, this morning we learned that the rate of inflation has reached its highest level in a decade. For ordinary workers and families, prices are going up at the very moment when they can least afford it. Workers and families need more than just a winter plan for COVID. They need a winter action plan to fight a Tory poverty pandemic that is only going to get worse. So, does the Prime Minister know, and can he tell us, how much Tory government cuts to social welfare will cost the average nurse?
Mr. Speaker, what we're doing is protecting people on low incomes up and down the country, and indeed we are freezing fuel duties, supporting childcare, and of course by the huge package of measures that we've brought in, not least the living wage, which will see an increase of £4,000, is already seeing an increase of £4,000 for every family on the living wage. But more importantly than that, he talks about the income of a nurse, Mr. Speaker. What we're doing is investing massively in health and social care up and down the country, which will help to fund, apart from anything else, Mr. Speaker, the increase in nurses' pay that they so thoroughly deserve. And I hope he will support that package.
Ian Blackford.
My goodness, Mr. Speaker, an increase in nurses' pay. Either the Prime Minister doesn't know or he simply doesn't care. Because when you take the cuts to universal credit and you take the increase in national insurance, Prime Minister, the figure you were looking for is that the average nurse will lose £1,736. Once again, this government is cutting the pay of key workers, the very people that we are relying on to see us through another difficult winter. The cost of living is spiralling, and people are being left with a Prime Minister who doesn't know how much his cuts are hitting key workers, and a Secretary of State for Welfare that doesn't know how universal credit works. Mr. Speaker, if any Scottish Tories are in a possession of a backbone, now would be a good time to find it. Does the Prime Minister expect any MPs from his Scottish branch office to stand against the callous cuts to universal credit? Or has the Prime Minister already bought them off with promises of jobs in his reshuffle?
Well, Mr. Speaker, actually what's happening is that we're funding the NHS across the whole of the UK, including in Scotland, I'm proud to say, with record sums. And we've ensured that nurses have access to a training bursary worth £5,000, a further bursary £3,000 for childcare costs, Mr. Speaker, and we have put up, and that is before we put up their pay by 3%, Mr. Speaker. So we are, and that is only possible because of the investment that we're making, the measures that I outlined last week, the package that we're putting forward for health and social care. And if he's really saying, Mr. Speaker, if he's really saying that the Scottish Nationalist Party are opposed to that investment, if he's really saying he would send it back, Mr. Speaker, then I think he's better off banging on as he normally does about a referendum, because he's better on that.
Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that the move to have a domestic ID card for each of Northern Ireland, Wales, England and Scotland has started, what consideration has my right honourable friend given to how the nationalists will use them to break our union?
I'm very grateful to the vigilance of my honourable friend about the matter of ID cards. I can tell him that we have absolutely no plans to bring them in, but I will watch them very carefully, Mr. Speaker.
Well,
Mr. Speaker, can I too offer my condolences to the Prime Minister on the loss of his mother. Health waiting lists are through the roof in Northern Ireland. Hard-pressed families are being hit by decisions from this government. But the DUP has been hit by a bad opinion poll, so they're threatening to bring down the very institutions of the Good Friday Agreement. Will this Prime Minister commit today to fast-tracking the legislation going through this House, agreed at NDNA, to stop the institutions coming down if one political party has a petulant strop?
I thank the honourable gentleman. I agree with him. It's very important that the institutions of Northern Ireland should be robust and that they should continue. But I also think that a responsible government has to address the issues of the protocol, the lopsidedness, and the way the way in which the EU has chosen to interpret them, and that I do not believe satisfies the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and that's what we're going to do.
Christian Wakeford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by also expressing my condolences to the Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister knows, yesterday I led a Westminster Hall debate about the British fur trade and the import of dead animal products from abroad. I know my right honourable friend cares deeply about animal welfare. Will he please join me in denouncing the horrible, cruel and unnecessary slaughter of an average of 1 million animals every year just for their skin? In a post-Brexit Britain, we can outlaw this horrible practice, a practice that I'm sure he and many, many others of British people hate. Will he meet with me to discuss my campaign to end the import of fur to Britain and truly make a fur-free Britain?
I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that my honourable friend speaks for millions and millions of people up and down this country who abhor the fur trade and don't want to wear fur. Obviously, we've banned the fur farming in this country for a long time, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to look at what we can do, working with the fur sector, to understand what we can do to prevent fur being imported into Britain.
Chris Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By the time my wonderful friend Linda went to the doctor, the cancer was already so advanced that she only had a few weeks to live. Many honourable members have been through cancer, and they know well that early detection saves lives. Yeah. And unfortunately, of course, long waiting lists will make it more difficult to save lives. The real problem we have is we have a massive shortage in the number of thousands, in the number of pathologists and radiologists to catch the cancers in the first place, and a massive shortage of oncologists and dermatologists to do the treatment. So regardless of the money, how are we going to make sure that we've got the personnel, not in 5 years' time or 7 years' time, but now, to be able to save lives?
First of all, I want to say how sad I am to hear about his constituent, Linda, and her experiences, I think, have been shared by literally millions of people in this country during the pandemic, because they haven't been willing or able to get the oncology treatment that they need because of the pressure of COVID on the system. The system is now coming back, trying to help everybody as fast as possible to fix the backlogs. And so, yes, it's necessary to hire more nurses and more doctors, and there are about 10,000 more nurses now, about 6,000 more doctors. And he's right in what he says. Totally right in what he says about radiologists and pathologists. But if I can just respectfully say to the right honourable gentleman, that must be done by means of the big, powerful package that we put forward last week to raise the funding necessary, which I believe that his party should have supported, and I think it's incredible that they didn't.
Tom Randall.
Mr. Speaker, work continues to improve maternity services at Nottingham University hospitals, and last week local MPs heard from those affected in a meeting with the Minister for Patient Safety, including from a former constituent of mine whose baby died only 8 weeks ago. Will my right honourable friend agree that it's right that there's going to be an independent review into local maternity services, and will he join me in asking for those affected to come forward to give evidence to that review, so that in the future mothers across Nottingham should get the maternity services that they both need and deserve?
Yes, I thank my honourable friend for raising this matter. I know that he's campaigned on this. The review is going ahead. We will look at what to do once it has been completed. But in the meantime, Nottingham University's hospitals are going to be supported through the National Maternity Safety Support Programme.
Olivia Blake.
Mr. Speaker, across the country there are children who haven't gone back to school because their schools say they can't meet their needs. Do the continued delays to the government's SEND review mean that the government has abandoned these children, and will the Prime Minister listen to the concerns of parents and young people and make sure their voices are heard in this review?
I'm very grateful to her. She's raising a very important point. But when this government came in, a key part of the £14 billion extra that we put into education was to invest in special educational needs, to allow local areas to build more SEND schools where they were necessary, and putting in another £780 million in extra SEND education for our kids. If there's a particular shortfall in a particular school, particular area that she wishes to raise, then please write to me about it.
Sir Roger Gale.
Mr. Speaker, I know that my right honourable friend wants to see the United Kingdom growing more crops. We're not going to blaze a trail to self-sufficiency by building over our finest agricultural land. That's got to stop now. On this back British Farming Day, we're at harvest time. And Mr. Speaker, all is not safely gathered in. In 3 weeks, Thanet Earth in my constituency, one of the largest glasshouse companies in the country, growing tomatoes, has had to trash £320,000 worth of produce because of no pickers and no drivers. Because of a lack of labour force, the crops are rotting in the fields and on our trees. Mr. Speaker, will my right honourable friend seek to introduce immediately a COVID recovery visa so that this year's crops are not lost?
I thank my right honourable friend, and he's absolutely right in what he says about the importance of buying British and eating British. Our food is the best in the world. He's right also to address the problems in the supply chain that we're currently seeing, but we are taking steps. And of course, this has been a problem for a long time. But what we have is the seasonal agricultural workers scheme, which we will use to ensure that British farms get the labour that they need, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I add my condolences to the Prime Minister and his family. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister believe that burning fossil fuels will not be a source of energy in the UK in the future?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and just since 2012, when I think I was Mayor of London, we have cut. We've cut CO2. We've cut our dependence. We've cut CO2 massively. We've cut our dependence on coal from, I think, 40% to less than 1%. How about that, Mr. Speaker?
To Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ullswater Community College, led superbly by head teacher Stephen Gilby, is a fantastic school in Penrith with 1,500 pupils, over 200 staff and a 600 square mile catchment area. The school is in desperate need of redevelopment to keep the site fit for purpose. In partnership with Myerscough College, the school is providing a lifeline for land-based education in Cumbria after the sad closure of Newtonry College in July. As a great opportunity for the government to level up rural areas, will the Prime Minister join me in supporting the proposed rebuild of Ullswater Community College?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend, who's a great campaigner for the people of Penrith and the border. But what I can tell him is that in addition to our support for the 500 school projects in the next rebuilding projects in the next decade, we're doing 100 immediately. And for the financial year 21-22, Mr. Speaker, Cumbria County Council has been allocated £5.3 million, Mr. Speaker, to improve buildings, including Ullswater Community College.
Kim Leadbeater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that the impending cuts to universal credit will not just have a devastating financial impact on people, but will also lead to stress and anxiety and undoubtedly have a hugely detrimental effect on their mental health, which on top of the pressures of the pandemic could prove devastating for some?
Mr. Speaker, I've answered this many times, but the answer is no. And in any case, Labour would abolish universal credit altogether, Mr. Speaker.
Back in 2004, Scarborough hit the national headlines when rumours of a new dental practice opening led to hundreds of people queuing round the block in the vain hope of registering as NHS patients. Today, whilst many better-off families continue to enjoy the discounted prices that the NHS offers, many children and vulnerable families still can't register as NHS dental patients in Scarborough-Whitby. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this needs fixing?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and that's why I totally agree. That's why we're investing in the NHS, and we want the NHS to be a better place for the dental profession, Mr. Speaker. Wouldn't it be a fine thing if this House of Commons voted overwhelmingly, with all members voting for our package of measures to support the NHS?
Adam Keir-Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, September marks Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Every day across the UK, 12 children and young people will be diagnosed with cancer, and of those 12, 2 will not survive. My constituent, Nadia Majid, and her family are campaigning to improve research and funding in this field. Nadia's son, Rehan, was only 4 years old when he was diagnosed with an aggressive brain tumour. Rehan tragically passed away only 4 months after his diagnosis. So I ask the Prime Minister, will he join me in thanking all the doctors, nurses and support staff who worked tirelessly to fight against childhood cancer? And will the Prime Minister meet with me to discuss how the 4 nations can work together to improve research and funding into childhood cancers and support families like Nadia's?
Yes, I know that she echoes the thoughts of millions of people. There's not a family in this country that hasn't been touched by cancer. Childhood cancer is particularly tragic, and that's why the government is investing huge sums in research, but also in supporting some of the fantastic charities that she mentions, particularly those investigating brain cancers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dr. Camilla Kingdon, the President of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, thinks that the routine testing of children without COVID symptoms is still interrupting children and teenagers' school attendance, and they don't believe it should continue. She thinks COVID should be treated like other diseases, and you only deal with children with symptoms. I agree with Dr. Kingdon and her colleagues in the Royal College. Can I ask the Prime Minister if he does as well?
Mr. Speaker, I have great respect for Dr. Kingdom, and indeed, as I have indeed for my right honourable friend. It's one of a number of views in the scientific community, Mr. Speaker, but we continue to think that testing is a very important route for keeping schools open, Mr. Speaker, which I believe is the best possible thing for the physical and mental health of our kids.
Nadia Witt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My condolences to the Prime Minister on the sad loss of his mother. Mr. Speaker, I was privileged to be able to take the time off work that I needed to recover from PTSD. But that should be a right for everyone, not a privilege. But far too many people aren't able to take the time off that they need because, by the former Health Secretary's own admission, statutory sick pay at £95 a week is not enough to live on. So a simple question, yes or no, will the Prime Minister today commit to full sick pay at a real living wage, not the government's current age-restricted minimum wage?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we have done, as the whole House will know, is make sure that everybody who gets COVID-related statutory sick pay gets it on day one. But we've also ensured that most people in this country, when they fall sick or when they need to recover, as the Honourable Lady has, do receive considerably more than statutory sick pay.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a Queen's Scout, I'm always keen to encourage young people to get into the most successful youth organisation in the world. So last week, I was delighted that the Scout Association has released and announced the first new age range for Scouting for 35 years, namely the Squirrels, which allows young people of 4 and 5 years old to become part of the Scout movement. It is particularly aimed at areas of deprivation and disadvantaged children. So will my right honourable friend agree with me that we should congratulate the Scout Association, thank the volunteers who give up their time to enable young people to do so, and encourage young people to get involved in a safe environment for adventure and new challenges?
Yes, Mr. Bill. What a wonderful! I had no idea that that the Scouts Association was doing that, but I think it's fantastic that uniformed youth services make a huge difference to outcomes for young people. I think it's fantastic that the Squirrels are now starting them off at the age of 4.
You've registered, Wilfred. Let's go to Jack Dromey.
Mr. Speaker, for over half a century, the GKN factory in Erdington has produced high-quality parts for the automotive industry. Now, following the hostile takeover by Melrose, the company has announced its intention to close the factory, sack 519 workers, and export jobs and production to continental Europe. Now, Prime Minister, there's been some welcome engagement with ministers around this issue. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that in one of the poorest parts of Britain, if the levelling up agenda means anything, this factory cannot close? If support for British manufacturing means anything, this factory cannot close. And does the Prime Minister therefore agree with me that it would be a betrayal of the British national interest were this great historic factory to become history?
Mr. Speaker, I know that my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is working with GKN to do whatever we can. But I can also tell them I believe the future for the UK automotive sector is incredibly bright, and that is because this, to get to the question from the honourable lady from the Liberal Democrats, this is the government that took the historic step ahead of every other European country to move towards electric vehicles by 2030, and we want this country to be in the lead. We're making sure that we get the investment in the UK that will drive new technology and drive growth and drive high-wage, high-skilled jobs in this country.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, at a time where our economy desperately needs investment, right now we are missing out on hundreds of millions of pounds of private capital flowing into the geothermal sector across Europe because the UK does not offer a competitive long-term tariff. Geothermal will help us heat homes, create jobs and level up the UK. I know we haven't yet found time to meet to discuss this, but can the Prime Minister find time in his diary in coming weeks so we can discuss this issue so we don't miss out on further investment?
I thank my honourable friend. I'm sorry that we haven't yet had time to discuss this properly, person to person, but I can tell you the government is very, very much interested in what he says in geothermal projects, so I'll make sure that a meeting is arranged as soon as possible.
Jamie Stone.
Speaker, I am sure that the Prime Minister will be as pleased as I am that this week the Scottish Land Court has given the green light, the final green light, to establishing a space launch facility in Sutherland. This is something that's great for the UK, and it's time to bury part of the difficult differences. On behalf of the delighted crofters of the community of Melness, I extend a warm invitation to the Prime Minister to come to the first launch. He will be given a delicious Highland tea, including some homemade scones.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't thank the honourable gentleman for his kind invitation. I look forward to taking it up. What we need, Mr. Speaker, is a suitable payload to send into space, and I think the gentleman opposite would do very well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, it was a pleasure to meet with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Leicester as they discussed a zero-carbon future with British Gas. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the development in neighbouring Derby of modular nuclear reactors also can play a major part in this zero-carbon future? What steps is the government taking to facilitate the rollout of this technology to the UK and the world, especially this week, Mr. Speaker, which is Nuclear Week, perhaps in more ways than one?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend. We've already working with Rolls-Royce. We gave £20 million seed money to the Rolls-Royce-led consortium when this government first came in to help them to develop their SMR design. But, Mr. Speaker, as I think I said to my old friend the other day, we want to see that company coming forward with a fully worked-out plan, a fully worked-out business case that we can all get behind.
Very good.
The Prime Minister has set out today that he wanted a high-skill, high-wage economy. He has also been on the record as saying that the tactic of fire and rehire is unacceptable. Surely the best way of ensuring that we have a high-wage economy is to work with the private members' bill to make sure that we do end that tactic of fire and rehire.
Mr. Speaker, the most vivid example of fire and rehire is that conducted by the Labour Party. If I recall, the leader of the Labour Party himself fired his deputy leader and then rehired her as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Mr. Speaker, and Shadow Secretary of State for the Future of Work. Mr. Speaker, the future of work under Labour is low wages, low skills, driven by uncontrolled immigration. The people of this country have had enough of that. What they want to see is high wages, high skills, controlled immigration, and that's what this government is committed to deliver.
Chair of the Agriculture, Neil Parish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Will my right honourable friend come to number 1 George Street and celebrate great British farming today? And can we have public procurement that is British food? And can we have food envoys all across the world promoting our great British food and farming?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I will thank my honourable friend, who is a living embodiment of the robustness of British agriculture. Is the living embodiment of the robustness of British, and indeed, Mr. Speaker, of the benefits of English food, of British food, Mr. Speaker. In particular, Devon, in particular, the beef of Devon, and I know, or Somerset. I know, Mr. Speaker, that he's right in what he says about food envoys. We've taken it up. Every single embassy across the world has a food envoy.
Final question, Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents live in Bridge House, Croydon, and their flats are covered in dangerous cladding that will cost millions to remove. They are not eligible for the government's building safety fund because it's the wrong type of cladding. Can the Prime Minister confirm, do my constituents have to pay the £23,000 each that they are being charged to remove this cladding, or does he have a better plan?
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable lady's constituents are being told that they do not have to remove that cladding, then the answer is no. And I think it's very, very important that this House should recognise that too many buildings have been unnecessarily, unfairly, I believe, categorised as dangerous and unsafe. Yes, of course we must remove dangerous cladding, and we're doing that. But I want householders, I want leaseholders I want people living in flats across this country to have the confidence that they can do so in safety, and that is what this government is doing.
We're now coming to the 10-minute rule. If people can leave quickly, I will then start the next business. It's all right, Luke. Good to see you. All right.